Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Unachira Brahmachari What is it? What verse is that one? So we're going to read the Sanskrit. Still usually read the Sanskrit though. No, I read it. And then when we come to the verse with the purport, everybody reads it. Well, I ain't got my glasses, so I'll have to turn and read it from here. Oh, maybe. Not much better, actually. It's a bit better. Better. Anyway. Oh, God. Record time. Thank you. So first we'll read from Canto 6, Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 16. King Chitraketu meets the Lord. Yam vai svasantam anuvishva srija svasanti yam chekitanam anuchitaya ucha kanti umandalam sarasapayati yasya murdni tasmai namo bhagavate stu sahasramurde. My dear Lord, it is after you endeavor that Lord Brahma, Indra, and other directors of the cosmic manifestation become occupied with their activities. It is after you perceive the material energy, my Lord, that the senses begin to perceive. So it is after you perceive the material energy, my Lord, that the senses begin to perceive. The Supreme Personality of Godhead holds all the universes on his heads, like seeds of mustard. I offer my respectful obeisance unto you, that Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has thousands of hoods. Sri Shuka Uvacha Samstuto Bhagavan Nevam Anantastam Abhashata Vidyahara Patim Pritash Chitriketam Karudava. Sukadeva Goswami continued, the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Anantadev, being very much pleased with the prayers offered to Chitraketu, the king of the Vidyadharas, replied to him as follows: O best of the Kuru dynasty, Maharaj Parikshit. Text 50. Sri Bhagavanu Vacha Yanaradangrira Gayamte Yanaradan Jirobyamte Vyaritam me Nushashanam Vyaritam me Sushashanam Samidosi Tayarajan Samidosi Tayarajan Vidyaya Darshanachame Vidyaya Darshanachame. Sri Bhagavanu Vacha Yanaradan Vyamte Vyaritam Menushashanam Samsidosi Taya Rajan Vidyaya Darshanachame Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Yannaradangiro Bhayamte Vyaritam Menushashanam Samsidosi Taya Rajan Vidyaya Darshanachame Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Vyobhyamte Vyobhyamte Sri Bhagavan Uvacha The Supreme Personality of Godhead Shankarshan replied, Yat which Narada Anjirobhyam by the great sages Narad and Anjira te unto you Yahitam spoken me of me Anushashanam the worship Samsidaha completely perfect Asi you are Taya by that Rajan O King Vidyaya mantra Darshanat from the direct sight Cha as well as me of me. Translation: The Supreme Personality of Godhead. No, wait a minute. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Anantadev, replied as follows: O King, as a result of your having accepted the instructions spoken by me, by the great sages Narad and Anjira, you have become completely aware of transcendental knowledge. Because you are now educated in the spiritual science, you have seen me face to face. Therefore, you are now completely perfect. In response, please. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Anantadev, replied as follows: O King, as a result of your having accepted the instructions spoken about me by the sages Narad and Anjira, you have become completely aware of transcendental knowledge. Because you are now educated in the spiritual science, you have seen me face to face. Therefore, you are now perfect, or completely perfect. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. The perfection of life is to be spiritually educated and to understand the existence of the Lord and how He creates, maintains, and annihilates the cosmic manifestation. When one is perfect in knowledge, he can develop his love of Godhead through the association of such perfect persons as Narad and Anjira and the members of their disciplic succession. Then one is able to see the unlimited Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. Although the Lord is unlimited, by his causeless mercy, he becomes visible to the devotee, who is then able to see him. In our present position of conditioned life, we cannot see or understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ata Sri Krishna Namadi Na Bhavat Graham Indriyai Sevan Mukhe Hi Jivado Swayam Eva Spuratyada. No one can understand the transcendental nature of the name, form, quality, and pastimes of Sri Krishna through his material, contaminated senses. Only when one becomes spiritually saturated by transcendental service to the Lord are the transcendental name, form, quality, and pastimes of the Lord revealed to him. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1, 2, 2, 3, 4. If one takes spiritual life under the direction of Narada Muni or his representative, and thus engages himself in the service of the Lord, he qualifies himself to see the Lord face to face. The Brahma Samhita 5.38 states, Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sadeva Vidayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Guna Swarupam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship the primeval Lord Govinda, who is always seen by the devotees, whose eyes are anointed with the pulp of love. He is seen in his external form of Shyamasundar situated within the heart of the devotee. One must follow the instructions of the spiritual master. Thus one becomes qualified and later sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead as evinced by Maharaj Chitraketu. Om Gyanti Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachadine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Pastatya Deshatarine. Yes, so they're in the nectar of in the Upanishads, nectar instruction, it explains about contaminated senses. They produce defects. Siddhanta Bola Chiche Nakara Alas, Hiya Haiti Krishna Yasuri Damanas. This is from Chaitanya Chant. So they produce defects, and it's like, I could hardly see the book, let alone the words at the first. So people say, he's going blind, which is true. We're all being affected by the material energy. So we can see that the eyes are actually, so it's not that when the eyes can see something, when I can see without glasses, we can see everything. So, we have to understand that everything in this world is limited by the particular body that we have. And by the three modes of nature, they're all pervading. That what's all pervading means that there isn't anywhere where there isn't the three modes of material nature. So we tend to think that, yes, I'm controlling my senses now. I'm starting to perceive how to go forward, and but actually, even the mind is controlled by the modes of nature. It's like we see that in Bhagavad Gita. What do we see in the old Bhagavad Gita? they had a picture of a chariot, and in that chariot was a little soul looking out. And the driver of the chariot was standing up, and then the reins for the horses were there, and the horses. And so it gives the example that the horses, 5 senses, 5 horses are like the 5 senses. And then the 6th sense is the reins, which are the mind. And then the intelligence is the driver. And the soul is nothing to do with them. So when we think we're doing something, we're controlled by the modes of nature. When we think our intelligence is either substandard or elevated intelligence, we think we're in the modes of nature. It's not us. All we can do is desire. And we've got a machine which is actually both subtly and grossly connected by these modes of nature. And therefore, we need instructions of how to use that machine, that's all. And when we start to understand this principle, we don't become proud. We don't become proud of anything, because we realize that first of all, I'm controlled by the modes of nature. I'm Jiva Bhuta. Jiva Bhuta means conditioned. And Nitya Siddha is the other one. There's 2 classes of living entities. Nitya Siddha means eternally free. But what does that free mean? It means even we're either under the controls of nature or we're under the control of the internal energy of the Lord. Is that right? That internal energy is making all arrangements. So, we just agree to follow the directions of the internal potency. It's like Madhu Mangal, when Krishna, he was holding up Govardhan Hill with his pinky little finger. And Madhu Mangal, he'd got his stick up. And he says, it's Brahma Tejas. I'm really holding this hill up, And so Krishna went, just dropped the hill a little bit, and he fell to the floor in a heap. And so then he realized, there's maybe I'm not so powerful. And so it's like that. It's another example is that when we do something, it's like a young child. He's got, 100 kilos barbells. Is that what they call them? He's got 100 kilos there, and he goes, and his father's already in each end behind him. And he goes, oh! And so it's like that. So this principle is, if we can understand that just one principle, we can advance so much in spiritual life. Whatever we're actually, it means that, what does it mean? It means that we go beyond the modes of nature. We go beyond what we think we can do. We're only limited by what we think we can do. But when we're a pure devotee and we're completely conversant, Krishna just empowers. Arjuna, empowered. They were fighting warriors. It was impossible for him to beat most of those warriors on the battle with Bhishma, Drona, even what they call him, Karna. Karna was a formidable fighter. What to speak of all the Rakshasas who were on that field, But, he actually, not effortlessly, but he just agreed to follow the instruction of Krishna as he gave him Bhagavad Gita. Just follow what I'm telling you to do. Let you just become an instrument, nimitra matram. So I'm making this point that we're an instrument, and all our problems come from thinking we're not an instrument. Because then we become proud, and then when we actually start to achieve something, wait until I really get going. Has anybody had that experience? I'm making some progress now, but just wait. I got caught up in that once, actually. Yeah, I went through a period when, I started traveling abroad, and I didn't know what was going off. Actually, I didn't, I felt as if I ain't got a clue how to actually do this service. And, everything was falling into place. I thought, wow. And then I realized that I'm not in charge. But then, Maya's so subtle that even though I knew that, I thought, wait until I really put some effort into it. And that's okay, We try to become, but then as soon as we start pushing a little bit, we forget. So, a devotee has to come to the point where he's actually helpless. He feels helpless. And that's a very auspicious sign. Anyway, that's the first thing I wanted to say. Because we're talking about, this verse here. We cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead through these contaminated senses we were talking about, right? And we were saying there was 3 modes of nature working everything. And by those 3 modes of nature, the mind's contaminated, the senses are contaminated, and we have 4 defects. We make mistakes. What are they? We have imperfect senses. Cheating. And what's the last one? Illusion. So Prabhupada explains these things in the Nectar of Instruction. So the only way this verse is leading on to, this point's made over and over again in Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. And, when Prabhupada was leaving this world, I saw one picture where he's laid there and he can hardly speak. He's just reciting Bhagavatam, translating, and he said, one of the things he said is something really esoteric. He said, we are not these bodies. That's like the last instruction. He said, and don't think this won't happen to you. So when we're young, it's like, we don't even think about it. Well, we may do, Maybe in the back of the mind, it creates a little bit of fear. But, what's the problem? But then as we get older, it's like we start to see that everything's starting to fall apart. And, it's made like that. Krishna's making it like that. First thing is it starts to fall apart and we think, ooh, wait a minute. But then we get used to that position we've fallen apart to, you know what I mean? I think it's not so bad, you know what I mean? I've still got 2 legs, and then the body falls apart a little more, and we become a little, surprised. And I think, well, it's not so bad, I've still got 1 leg, and that's how it goes. That's how Maya works, right up to the last breath. We're thinking, it's not so bad. It's like Prabhupada says, somebody is laid in hospital and they've got 1 leg up in a pot. They're actually, they've got the shakes because they've got high fever, and they're passing stool in bed, and the visitor comes, says, "How are you doing?" "I'm all right." So, and the only way we can do it is by, first of all, knowledge. We're aware, we're aware what's happening, but then, the school of hard knocks mean the body grows old, and then we become aware, we get realization. But then we still can't do anything. Why? Indriyani paranyahur, indriyabhyap pramanasa, manasasto yobudir paratastasa. This is at the end of the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita. I think it's 42, 41, maybe 42. It says that it gives a hierarchy of the body. The hierarchy of the body is the sense objects, the dull matter, then the senses who manipulate them, and then the mind who controls the senses, then the intelligence, the false ego. That's beyond what we're talking about today, but the intelligence, if we can we educate by reading books we've just been talking about. If we know what's going to happen, then we can prevent it, right? Has anybody had the experience that you know what you should do, but you can't? So why? So it's saying that so this chapter says that this verse says that because the intelligence, if the intelligence understands that I just have to bypass the mind, I have to bypass the senses, I have to just follow instructions, and everything will be all right. He says, and it's all, that's the theory. He says, but there's every chance of a fall down from that understanding. He says, due to a lack of spiritual strength. Well, he doesn't say that. It says due to a lack of contact with Krishna. So, you know, the last instruction of the Shastra is to always remember Krishna, never forget. And so it's like that. If we see Krishna in the equation all the time, we're never actually in difficulty. And so this is why we're following this process of hearing constantly and chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. When we chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra with attention, then, you know, we feel a change as it's happening. When we chant with attention, we can afterwards we can feel a big change in our consciousness. So then the modes are not actually affecting us so much, and we can do what we're supposed to do. The senses are controlled. There was one devotee, I think I mentioned him before, Dr. Fakir Mohan. He was associate of Gaur Govinda Maharaj, and he was considered by devotees in ISKCON to be very advanced. And so this Dr. Fakir Mohan, he was also about the same age, and he used to visit England and the manor, and I was at the manor, and they gave me the, you know, I was in charge of the classes, and so I couldn't get anybody to bring him to it, so I went and fetched him from his house in Bushy, in Boreham Wood, and you know, when he came, he just got simple clothes on, and he was so respectful, I couldn't believe it. And his history, he was head of a Sanskrit college. He was a headmaster of a Sanskrit college all his life. He was born in a Vaishnava family, and he was a lifelong celibate, but he wore white. He didn't wear saffron. And when he gave class, all he gave class on was Nam. Nam Prabhu. He used to say. And when he started talking about the holy name, you know, I ain't got my bead bag here, but your hand reached out for your bead bag. You thought, wow, you know. And you felt like, really, this is where it's at. And that's actually a fact. When it's spoken to by somebody who's actually got a taste for the holy name, then, you know, it affects us. So that's one of the qualifications of being a spiritual master, is that we actually are a little bit advanced, and we have a taste for the holy name. You know, when you're initiated, you're given the beads, aren't you? But, you know, if you get the same taste as what the Guru's got. So it's not just that. But Gaur Govinda Maharaj said, if you haven't got the holy name, you can't give it. But anyway, I'm not going to go into that now, but definitely by that association, you know, we're able to start controlling the senses. That's right. That's what we're talking about here. Ta Sri Krishna Namadi, Nabhavatram Indriya, seven Mukhi Jivado, Swayameva Spurachida. So that's the tongue. The tongue is the first thing to control. And so that's the holy name, but it's not just controlling, it is controlling our whole thoughts and our whole actions when we control the tongue. If we start talking nonsense, then we'll do nonsense, because the mind becomes permeated with nonsense. So, you know, we're always supposed to be engaged in Krishna Katha. And there's no dearth of Krishna Katha nowadays, is there? You just like, you know, and it's there. You know, we can get, you know, somebody giving class in Hawaii. You know. And then, you know, you can get backlog of classes from, you know, 20, 30 years ago of different devotees. So, you know, we're not, it's good to get a live class because then it's more interactive, but it's all there. Like I was listening to, I was listening to, I read a book called Journey Home about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe more, and I was really inspired by, the stories more than anything. Wow. But then, I saw it was on the website as a audio. I thought, oh, I'll listen to that when I'm driving, and I've been listening to it, and actually I realised, but I listened to it the same. There's so much philosophy there, and basically, what it means, the first part of that, what I've listened to so far, is that difficulty is a good thing. So, when we're faced with difficulty, then if we're actually a little bit pious, then we start to actually see Krishna. We have to start to see how to go forward and what this difficulty is actually giving us an opportunity to do. And therefore we start to, like Queen Kunti, if we're a little bit advanced, we start to thank the Lord for sending some difficulty. So, we're talking about the tongue. So, the tongue is probably it's one of the smallest things in the body, isn't it? I don't know, they say it goes down here somewhere, but, it's just a small organ, isn't it? It's like on a ship. You've got a huge ship, an ocean oil tanker. It's like, 500 or 600, half a mile long, some of them, 500 or 600 yards long, and probably, 100 yards wide, and, probably 300 yards deep. And it's full of oil, and it's going on the sea. And it takes about 5 or 6 miles before you can stop one. And at the back, there's this piece of iron, probably as big as a house, compared, it's like a little thing. But, you just turn that a little bit and all the... So, we control this, and this whole body's controlled. Let's have a look. Because we have designations. Designation. Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? Good question. So, what's that verse? Sarva Upadi. Sarva means all. Upadis. Upadis means designations. Vinirmuktam becomes zero. Sarva Upadi Vinirmuktam Tatvare Paratmena Nirmalam. Rishikesha Rishikena. Sevanam Bhakti Uchite. When we serve the master of the senses. Then when we understand we're not the body, when the designation's no longer there, there's only you and Krishna. And then we can serve Krishna to our heart's content. And at that point, we, like Narada Muni, it's talking about seeing Krishna. We cannot, first of all, we'll talk about, we can only come to that point by help, by, good instructions, and by practical service to realize those instructions. But then as we become more advanced, then we can start to become free. What's that stage? It's called being fixed. Anybody remember? Nishta. This means that, we've practiced Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. And now there's no, or very little, anartha, maybe some subtle maybe there in the mind or the intelligence. But we're free from misconceptions and attachments, and that's what's holding us back. And then we proceed very quickly on the path of devotion. We've already got some taste, but then the taste becomes very much prominent. And then that taste, we're attached to doing service. We're attached to service. We're attached to that service. This is called Rati, not Rati, but Ashakti. And Ruchi, then Ashakti. But then in Ashakti, that actual, very strong taste to serve through a particular service it gradually changes over into a strong attachment to actually serve Krishna. So that's a big change, and that all comes under a Shakti. It comes from maybe a little unconscious to full conscious, full Shravanam. And that's spoken about in the Nectar of Instruction, the process. And then when that focuses on Krishna, then there's Rati or Bhava Bhakti. Bhava is a simple, its meaning. Bhava means, there has to be some taste for doing things, right? That's Bhava. And that Bhava Bhakti, then Narada Muni was meditating and he came to that stage and he saw Krishna in the heart. He saw Vishnu. And he became, his hair stood on end and his body became erupted with ecstatic feelings. And then, he was meditating on that form and then suddenly disappeared. And, it was so attracted to that form that it was like, he was devastated. And so he really tried to, proving the point, he really tried to make the effort again. But it was beyond him. And so a devotee has to learn to take shelter of Krishna. We can't just take shelter of our own efforts. And when we do that, then there's a big change in our devotional service and a big change in how we deal with others and how things go forward. That dependence. And so he learned dependence on Krishna. And then all of a sudden he heard a voice and Vishnu was there. And he says, unfortunately, you have not reached the right standard of devotional service in this lifetime, so you will not see me again. I'm appearing before you just to actually increase your desire to obtain me. And then he disappeared. So it's usually in the Madhurya Kadambini, it says that when we actually see the Lord, that's complete perfection. Any last trace of attachment is completely purified away. And so, I don't know how it works in that particular situation. He actually saw Vishnu. So, my only thoughts on that, and your thoughts, is that, Narada Muni is an eternal associate of the Lord. He's already on the topmost platform. And he's going through a certain situation to teach us. So we shouldn't expect to see the Lord before we're, completely perfect. And then Narada Muni, he emerged into, at the end of that lifetime, he actually went through the whole creation, all the material world, through experiencing different things. And then at the end of life, he says, all of a sudden, just as illuminations follows lightning, he left that particular body. And it says that he went into the body of Mahavishnu. Apparently, anybody who's left at the end of this creation, they'll go into the body of Mahavishnu. And I don't know if I've got the story right yet. I've got it wrong, actually. The devastation, then he went into the body. He became a Brahmalok, then he went to... But, he didn't actually... it's just like Anjira Muni and all these great sages. They're all eternally liberated souls. And when they leave this world, it's not like we leave it. And so then when Mahavishnu breathed out again, he came out again. But, there's so many things going off in that time period. Anyway, we're going off the point a little bit now. But these are the difference between a Nitya Siddha and a Jiva Bhuta. Questions? Okay, so let me just round up then. Yeah, so I haven't read this story for a while. I haven't had a chance to read through, so I can't say any more except on the verse. So yeah, at that point, by the process of devotional service, the senses become purified, free from upadis, and then, you know, the Supreme Lord can take seat in the heart. And then we can see with the eye of devotion. Sarvasya Chaham Hridi Sani Vishnu. Krishna's in the heart and is giving knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So when a devotee is ready, then Krishna endows that devotee with all spiritual ornaments, all qualification. Okay, so here Trishiketu, his questions answered by the Supreme Lord Dayananda.
Thank you for class, Maharaj. Very nice class. Thank you. It's interesting. We've had a story previously that Daksha saw the Lord face to face, and then after that he made quite a few mistakes. Daksha saw the Lord. He performed austerities, and then the Lord gave him the benediction that now you can go ahead and produce progeny. So he had his desire fulfilled. Although he did see the Lord face to face. We know Indra has seen the Lord face to face quite a few times, and then continues to make mistakes after that. I was always under the impression, like it's saying in this verse, that once you've seen the Lord face to face, then you're completely perfect. And then you made the nice example about Narada Muni, that maybe it's a pastime, because Narada Muni saw the Lord face to face, but then he had to go through his whole life then just hankering to see him. Whereas we see with Maharaj Tritiketa, sees the Lord face to face, and bingo, he's achieved perfection. So is that because the Lord has a higher destination for some devotees? So although he shows himself, he still wants them to hanker and perfect themselves, and others get a lesser destination, maybe like Vaikuntha. So they just have to see the Lord and then they're perfected.
Well, I know, in the case of Narad, that's the case. I mean, I've heard different opinions about that. So I can only speak what my realizations are according to Shastra. And same as I say, these devotees like Anjira Muni and Narada Muni, and he's eternally liberated soul. So, Krishna and Lord Vishnu, issue with Lord Vishnu in the early part of the Bhagavatam like this, they do appear to devotees. And like you say, Indra, and in different pastimes. So I don't know what exactly the answer is. I can only speculate a little bit. It's not really speculate. It's just like what's in Shastra. It says that when the Lord comes into this world, he brings his associates and the demigods as well. So it could be a few things. It could be that the demigods maybe reach the point of perfection. That's one thing, although so he appears. Or it may be that, that's one thing anyway. And the other thing is the associates, they're eternal liberated souls, so they act out a thing, like I said about Narad. They're actually already liberated, so they can see the Lord, and it's like that. But I've heard other understandings of it. So Bhagavatam's like that. It's not. That's why Siddhanta Bale Chitte Kara Alas Iha Haide Krishna Age Suridananas. It needs to be discussed. So we shouldn't neglect to discuss controversial points. It says because by discussing them, one's mind becomes strong, and one can see Krishna. So if anybody else wants to add anything to that, then you're welcome. But there will be.
Vipralamba as this feeling of separation that sometimes part of the process also is that the devotee has to feel separation. And that separation is only really there once you've seen the Lord, once you get his darshan, and then he steps out, and the separation of Vipralamba is intense, and their intensity propels the devotee into Goloka, into Raganuga actually, because Vaidhi Bhakti takes you to Vaikuntha, whereas the Raganuga and the association of the Ragatmaka Bhakti that takes you into Goloka, isn't it?
Yeah, they're queens of Dwarka. That's a relationship from Vaidhi Bhakti. But we have to get the association of a Brajvasi to, for Raganuga Bhakti. Raga means, Anuga means to follow, a Raga Bhakti, Ragagnika Bhakti. So it's more personal. I have no experience of that. But anyway, we're following Raganuga Bhakti, Raga Bhakti. That's Srila Prabhupada. So he said, just do what I do. And so that's the principle, is that we follow Prabhupada's instructions, and everything else will become revealed in due course. Anything else?
Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much for the class. You were talking about we hear a lot that we need to defend against a mechanical process of sadhana.
What's that?
We hear that we need to protect against mechanical sadhana, mechanical practice in bhakti. But I'm wondering, before we get to this point of attachment and taste, then how can we protect against being mechanical in our practice?
I couldn't really hear properly, but I think what you said, somebody like to just repeat it a bit louder. The danger is if we, what do you say about spontaneous?
Before we become attached, then our devotional service may be mechanical. How to protect against a mechanical practice?
Well, what does mechanical mean? It means we don't put our mind into it. We don't understand. We just do it in a rote fashion. So, that's not very enlivening to Krishna, is it? If somebody speaks to you and he's not bothered about speaking to you and he's just doing it in a mechanical way, you wouldn't stay there. You just think, oh, forget this. So it's like that. And so that's the hard part, is, being aware of what's happening all the time, being conscious, Krishna conscious, putting Krishna into the equation and doing things in a Krishna conscious way, not just a mechanical way. There is some benefit, because at least in the beginning, we've made the decision to follow the process. And because the process is coming from Krishna, we actually advance, but it's only to a certain point. At some point, the relationship has to develop. And the relationship starts meaning that we start to remember who we're serving and start to focus on that. And like I said earlier in the class, that when we're in difficulty, that's more easy. It's not easy to do, but we have a tendency to remember Krishna. Usually when there's difficulty, we try and put it right, and then after some time realize we can't, and then we may start to turn to Krishna. But Prabhupada, he would say, he would always talk about him and his spiritual master. He was always aware at all times that he was getting mercy. So that's what we're aiming for, that we're always aware that and his spiritual master say, we'll do so and so if Krishna desires. So, we're acting on a mechanical platform even when we say that. But if we keep saying it, it'll become realized eventually. And And we also get realizations as we practice in service, which lets us understand that Krishna's there. You know, this becomes, it's not a coincidence anymore. We just, you know, it's obvious that Krishna stepped in there. There was no doubt. So Krishna will reveal himself when we're actually properly consciousness. When we're making the effort, Krishna will also reciprocate with realization. And so devotional service can be very quick. If we want to focus on Krishna, then Krishna will actually reciprocate with that. And that starts with our chanting in the morning. When we're really focusing on the holy name, then Krishna will, it means that we're putting everything else aside and we're depending on Krishna. Hare Krishna. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaura Prema. Hare Bol.
His Holiness Dayananda Maharaj ki.
Jai.